Hello, welcome back to A Slightly Twisted Female. I'm your host, Brittany RouXX. Sorry for getting started a little bit late. Glad to see that the chat is already off the hook. Hello, everybody. So today's topic, let me put on the live chat. Today's topic, we are going to be focusing on who is behind funding this sort of trans movement. Anybody who's been alive for longer than 10 years remembers that there was a time when it did not seem like American politics and U.S. culture and Western culture as a whole was not in a transgender chokehold. There was a time where we could discuss things like women's rights and women's needs for privacy and, the unique needs and issues that centered on women without men having to jump in and pretend like those issues impact them as well. We've always had men jumping in to insert their voices whenever we spoke about ourselves, but not quite in this way. And it seemed like there was around, I would say around 2015, give or take a couple years, that's when all of a sudden it just seemed like we went through this massive cultural shift, and it all sort of came, it pierced through the mainstream with things like I Am Jazz, My Name is Caitlyn. So Caitlyn Jenner's Woman of the Year award and her, I think, was it Vanity Fair or something like that cover where he came out as as Bruce Jenner came out as Caitlyn Jenner. And, and it all just sort of seemed to happen at once. So we had Jazz Jennings, who wrote I Am Jazz, and then had the I Am Jazz TV series. So that covered the whole idea of, born this way and transgender children. And then, the issue of, then there was Orange is the New Black, where we had, the fictional piece of a transgender inmate, a, large man who had undergone penile inversion surgery to approximate the appearance of female genitalia, and that was portrayed, he was portrayed as this really sweet and caring and funny and just likable, empathetic character who was being housed with women. And anybody, the unsuspecting eye, just sort of like, this is right on the heels of the gay civil rights movement where, the LGB had been, really advancing in their sort of, national and even international awareness of this community and the needs of this community, and really rapidly growing acceptance for things like gay marriage. And it just sort of jumped on the heels of what were multiple civil rights movements that seemed to spearhead at the same time, from the hashtag Me Too, which was recognition of sex crimes against women, the Black Lives Matter movement, which is the recognition of police brutality against the black community, and then this transgender push, which came in, was sort of the gay pride, era. And, a lot of this happened with, you got to remember, I'm 35 now. I did not grow up with things like Facebook. We didn't grow up with, anybody who's a millennial did not grow up with social media. So, part of the reason why so many of these things all became such a massive collective, these movements that happened sort of all at once, because for the first time we have this sort of instantaneous connectivity, this ability to share ideas and have conversations, with rapid fire availability. And it just seems like the transgender movement sort of snuck its way in, riding on the coattails of these other movements, and came in very much like a Trojan horse. Now, what's really interesting about it is that unlike Me Too, or even, unlike other movements, even like Black Lives Matter, where you can speak up and sort of push back some of the ideas, relatively without major ramifications. Anybody who has tried to speak out about the transgender craze has experienced being immediately silenced, getting notifications from Twitter that if you don't go back and delete your tweet, you're going to get locked out and potentially lose your account. Getting shadow banned on Instagram. I've lost several Instagram accounts from speaking out. We've all learned to self-censor, using different terms, veiled terminology, so that we can say what we want to say without getting axed. Some of the most prominent amongst us have these tiny followings, not because they're not influential, not because people, what they say doesn't attract attention or doesn't bear any merit. It's because they cannot get anywhere with these algorithms that seem so obviously stacked in the favor of one side. And actually, in another video, and I do want to go through, during a Senate hearing, a judiciary hearing, where the Senate was grilling certain members of the government about what has been revealed as serious, a sort of relationship between the Biden administration and these big tech conglomerates like, Facebook or the Meta, which is now known as Meta Corporation, even previously Twitter, where the Biden administration actually put major pressure on these publishing sites, because to remember, social media, they're publishers. It's very much like banning literature, whereas before we had these book publishing organizations and businesses. Now corporations, businesses like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they're publishers of microblogging. We're all authors. Anybody who has an account on any of these platforms is an author. And we are de facto experiencing what is the newest iteration and form of book burning. Our government is actively censoring and blacklisting certain authors. If you've ever been kicked off of one of these platforms because of your, sincerely held political beliefs, because of any challenges that you've made to the dominant narrative, you've been blacklisted. And it is coming to light that the Biden administration had explicitly contacted these companies to enforce a code of speech that is acceptable and speech that is unacceptable. And for any unacceptable speech, those people had to be thrown out. And my question is, as is Jennifer Bilek, as is, I'm sure, the vast majority of you listening into the stream, is why the hell does it seem like, particularly I think the two biggest topics that seem so off limits to criticism, especially, from the 2020 era on, but even prior to that, I would say from, 2016 on, 2015 on, the COVID crisis, the COVID pandemic, could not challenge it, could not say anything about the mandates. You're being fact checked. And then additionally, Trump, but the transgender issue, more so than anything else. I've seen people criticize Me Too. I've seen people criticize feminism. I've seen people criticize Black Lives Matter with so much more impunity. But God forbid you speak out about transgenderism. The axe will come down on you hard. Clearly, it is not organic, because we know that the silent majority of people know intuitively that there is something wrong about this. Why? Because it's not natural. Why? Because it is a neo-religion. Why? Because it goes against all of our instincts as intelligent evolutionary beings. So let's take a look. Somebody who's been doing phenomenal work to sort of uncover what is going on. And something that Jennifer Bilek says that I find so interesting and true. She says, I'm an American. Whenever I see that something has an inordinate amount of power, I know that there's money involved, massive amounts of money involved. That's absolutely the case with the transgender agenda. So where is this money coming from? Who's funding it? Why are they funding it? What is the end game? We must follow the money. So we are going to be talking about somebody named James Pritzker, who now goes by the name of Jennifer Pritzker. He is a part of the Hyatt Hotel Fortune family. This is a family who are the heirs of the Hyatt Hotel chain's grand fortune. There are 11 billionaires in the Hyatt family. Count 11 billionaires. That's with a B in the Hyatt family. Jennifer Pritzker himself is currently the wealthiest trans-identifying male on the planet with a net worth of nearly $2 billion. He is a former colonel in the military, and he has a sort of dual interest of, military history and transgender affairs, and sometimes he'll cloak it under the force teaming acronym of LGBTQ. But we know that whenever we hear LGBTQ all sort of smashed together, it's really the TQ that are, the engine of the train, and the LGB is just the cover. They're the facade. They're the thing that, they're the shield. But the L doesn't really get to speak up. In fact, the L is being actively harmed by those latter letters, as is the G and the B. So let's take a look at what's going on. And again, Jennifer Bilek, who is, she is an artist. She's an investigative journalist. She has the 11th Hour blog. I absolutely recommend that you get in touch with, read this blog, go through it. She has, we're going to go through it together, but definitely continue to read it. All right. So first and foremost, let's take a look at who Jennifer Pritzker is. Let's see, the Tawani organization. So, all right, in 1994, he founded a philanthropic group called the Tawani organization. And this is basically this is the organization through which he, funnels money and there he is right there. I mean, once again, this is a male who isn't even trying. And god damn it, why is this fucking tacked on? Fuck. Sorry. Okay. It's annoying. Hold on. I gotta get my one window to stop. Here we go. Okay. So how's my audio? All right, sorry, it's getting a little, because there's so much to go through. It's a little bit hard to even organize where to begin, and plus my computer is being really slow. But let's take a look at this Tawani organization. I also want to get I want to get more about his background. Okay, so let's see. The Tawani Foundation is a private foundation that accepts applications by invitation only. There is no open application period. Please understand that we are unable to fund every program or organization that requests aid. So obviously this is like a very elite, specific organization. They choose who to give funding to. Okay, and what I found really interesting is it says in their focus, and I'm not even going to try to pull it up. It's right here. It's under their focus on the 20 page. It's just my computer's being super slow, but I'm going to read it. Our giving is concentrated in areas of particular and personal interest to Colonel Pritzker, reflecting her interest in the military, history, the environment, and human health. We're going to get more into that later about what he means by human health. Uniting those interests are threads of preservation, conservation, and discovery. The Tawani Foundation supports organizations whose focus reflects our own, to connect the past with the future, and to use that perspective to make a real, measurable difference in the present. Of course, that means it basically said nothing except that these are all personal pet projects and interests of Jennifer Pritzker. So he created a foundation to do his own philanthropy to basically influence politics, mainstream society, and American culture. Let's take a look. All right. Continuing my family's tradition of putting personal philanthropy into service for the public good, the Tawani Foundation strives to make grants that empower the organizations we support to realize and build on their missions. And again, this family is from Illinois, so that's where a lot of philanthropy is concentrated, but it obviously spreads out throughout the United States. Okay, so two major things that I've noticed that the Tawani Foundation focuses on is LGBTQ education. They're involved in a lot of higher education, and as we've seen, so I graduated in 2010 from Carnegie Mellon University, which was previously a men's only engineering college founded by Andrew Carnegie. It then, opened up and added different schools and became a university. The difference between a university and a college, obviously, is a college is a university is like a collection of colleges. So it's like, the College of Computer Science, the College of Arts and Humanity, and then they have programs within that, the College of Fine Art, right? And one college just sort of has one of those, so it's a university. And I had a dual degree in electronic and time-based media. So I did a lot of creative programming, focused on Flash programming, things like that, animation, also, video, and then also international relations with a concentration in Latin America. And then I had a business minor. And I say this to say it was even at that time, having gone through the university system, really realizing just how captured, my colleagues were by very leftist, liberal ideology. I remember we had to take a History 101 course. Everyone in the entire university had to take a world history course, and it was taught by a self-proclaimed communist, and he gave us a very, very communist spin. The math and engineering programs were more conservative. But then when you get into the College of Fine Arts, which is where my electronic and time-based media major focused in, it was, again, a lot of people who identified as socialist, there was a diversity in ethnicity, there's a diversity in skin tone, there was a diversity in sort of superficial things like how people look, but what there was a notable lack of was diversity in thought. So when I graduated and when I started to shift away from a more liberal leftist thinking, I came out your typical college educated leftist. When I got into the real world and I started to actually expose myself to other ideas, which the role of a university is to expose you to a wide variety of ideas. I didn't feel that I got that. I was great at learning new technology. I was taught how to learn new technology. I can do that well. But in terms of, philosophy and political philosophy, again, we had a very left-leaning perspective. And again, you wonder why. It is men like Jennifer Pritzker who spends a lot of money influencing higher education. Okay, this is not an accident. This is by design. Okay, these I even remember. I think it was God, who came? It was one of the Fox News women, not Greta Van Susteren. It was one of the Fox News women came to Pittsburgh. I think it was, so I graduated in 2010. She had to have come in like 2008. And I remember it was very similar to when we went to Pittsburgh, or it was very similar to when Riley Gaines went to Pittsburgh and the whole city went insane. They were rioting, they were demonstrating, they were protesting her. And I remember being like, yeah. And I like blindly was like, yeah, F her or whatever. So insane now. But of course we could have all these hyper leftist speakers come in, no problem. The conservatives, they maybe would grumble about it, but we wouldn't have these massive demonstrations. And it's crazy because those who coined themselves Antifa, which stands for anti-fascists, seem to be the most hell-bent on censoring and blocking the speech of opposing ideas in a university system, which is meant to be a marketplace of ideas. Let's see. So here we go. Sorry, my so he had gotten in, hold on. Pritzker, what was it? Yale University. I know that he has funded a lot of programs at the University of Chicago. Let's see, where are we? Okay, I'm gonna use Jennifer Bilek's sources as much as possible because I also want to highlight her. I think is, while it's important that we expose these guys, I also want to be, while I'm doing that, highlighting the work of other feminists. These are the giants, upon whose shoulders that I stand, and we as feminists and as people working to, liberate women from this trans chokehold that we're all in. It's really important, I think, that we all give each other credit, those who are doing the work. Jennifer Bilek is the one who has been really working to uncover and expose this thread in the trans rat king. Am I saying, I'm sorry, if I say her, it's, again, and I had somebody call me a trans femme, I guess, because I had accidentally said her when I was talking about a trans identifying male. And that's the thing. It is meant to be confusing. And it's another reason why language is so important. Because, when we say words, when we say things like she, her, our brain processes that to mean, a woman. When we say trans woman, we hear the word woman. It's harder for our brain to go and do the mental gymnastics to say, well, it's actually a man who identifies and da-da-da-da. It's why it's important. And it's meant to confuse. It's meant to, just trip you up. And that's why a lot of gender critical people who claim to be gender critical and who still say, well, but I like to be polite and I like to use preferred pronouns. And no, I don't think that they're actually a woman, but, I can still be civil. And no, because it changes the way that we think about things. Right? It's meant to be confusing, so if I slip up, and it's because when I'm talking about somebody named Jennifer, I'm almost always saying she, her. I have a lot of friends that, I'm an 80s baby. Jennifer was a huge name in the 80s for babies born in the 80s and the 70s. And so when I'm talking about Jennifer, I'm typically talking about she, her. That's another reason why, as much as possible, like Leah Thomas, I don't like to call him Leah. Even for Jennifer Pritzker, his name is James. We can call him James, and maybe that'll make it easier for me. But you're absolutely right, and I appreciate, always correct me. I'm not, I appreciate that. Definitely correct me, and so we can point it out and make the point, that we need to correct each other. It's misgendering to call a man she, her. That's the true misgendering. So let's take a look at, all right. The Pritzker family, the capture of Yale University, and the marketing of synthetic sex to children. So Jennifer Bilek calls trans identities synthetic sex identities, which is exactly what they are. Helena Blavatsky's my beautiful mod says lots of people don't get trans women are men. It's confusing on purpose. It absolutely is. It's meant to confuse. Let's see. And again, so people like, and I want to say people like James Pritzker. So Jennifer Pritzker, his real name is James. He was previously a Trump donor. And then once he said that, I chose to support Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton because I thought that Donald Trump would be at least as, accommodating to LGBTQ identities as anybody else. Because I think a lot of people see Donald Trump as like he just went with, conservatives because that's who would have him. I don't think he really cares about, it's really about however he could get into politics. It's whoever would back him is who he would back. You know what I mean? I mean, he was a Democrat for a long time. And so people like, Jennifer Pritzker and people like Blair White and people like, if you notice on Twitter, a lot of the true transsexual people all consider themselves conservative. And what they're not conservative, what they really are is libertarian. Okay, so libertarians typically believe, in liberal, so conservative, it's technically liberal economics in the sense of limited, it's liberal but conservative in terms of it's liberal economics. So free market system, a free market pro-capitalist system, right? Pro-business, pro-private interest, pro-private wealth, things like that. Small government, limited social welfare programs, limited social government regulation. Okay, so when you're a libertarian, you sort of like free market capitalism, free markets, and then also, whereas conservatives have a conservative social aspect where there's a lot of Christian influence. They believe in, regulating things like abortion, regulating things like gay marriage and keeping conservative social issues. A libertarian believes in liberal, is socially liberal. Okay, so they're sort of like liberal across the board, even though technically it would be conservative economics, but liberal in the sense that small government across the board. Okay, so they're pro Second Amendment, very anti-government gun control or oversight on gun control. They're pro sort of allowing people to sort of do what they want. So whether it's transition, and that's why it makes sense that a lot of these true transsexuals, so a lot of the people from the queer theory and these sort of communist transsexual people, the idea of the non-binary, and it's just all these sort of weird mix of just bizarre, synthetic sex identities, using Jennifer Bilek's term. Those people are the super far left. Okay, but then when you have people like Blair White, who's pro Second Amendment, pro gun ownership, who's about, free markets, limited government regulation in terms of, the economics and businesses and marketplace, there's a lot of people who fall under that, and they sort of stick with the sort of like binary. They're still binary. They're just men who want to be women. They don't believe in the non-binary stuff, and they believe that there's like, the true transsexuals, if they try to pass and try to, fit into stereotypical like gender roles and gender appearances, these are the guys who are trying to be that sort of like, who look like people like Blair White. Right? They're not like your pink-haired weirdo with like a bunch of like piercings everywhere and goofy, makeup and stuff like that. They're whatever. Okay? And so people like Pritzker, people like Caitlyn Jenner, a lot of these true trans conservatives are really libertarian. Okay? So it makes sense that he originally backed Trump until, Trump really cracked down and was like, no, we don't want trans people in the military. It really doesn't, it sort of, endangers our military in general. It doesn't serve us, which is absolutely accurate. What we don't need is giving, military personnel surgeries. What we don't need for them is to go through hormone withdrawal in the middle of the battlefield. It's ridiculous. It just creates this awkward environment for everybody. Let's see. Leon Donnelly says, James Hughes, Citizen Cyborg, 2003 Transvision Conference at Yale University. Vanessa Foster, the chair of the National Transgender Action Coalition, announced transsexuals as first transhumanists. Yeah. And that's what this all, and to be clear, that's what this is all about. It's about two things, about transhumanism. It's about being able to, Matt, what do you think is the main things that the super rich is most concerned with, right? It's protecting their legacy. And for that usually typically means two things: children, having a genetic legacy of having children, and then also a legacy of, that's why they put their name on everything. That's why, Trump put his name on everything. Pritzker puts their names on everything. That's why whenever you get these mega donors who will donate a lot of money, they'll change the name of a school or a hospital to represent that person's name. Andrew Carnegie, Carnegie Hall, he loved music. They love having a legacy, something lasting that will, continue. Right? So think about, and then that's one thing, is their legacy. And two is doing whatever they can to defy aging and death. That's because one thing that doesn't matter how much money you have, billionaires, how much money you have, we are all going to be in the ground. Okay? Once we're dead, that's the great equalizer. Death is something that we will all face at one point. And I think that it is something that the uber rich would love to solve for themselves, how to stop and reverse aging. And I think for a lot of these ultra rich gay men, these homosexual men, and again, I'm not talking about just regular gay men, but I feel like there's, super rich gay men who sort of weaponize their homosexuality to the point that they can cut out women. They can still have this full range of sort of almost heterosexuality without even having to include women. How can they do that? Through synthetic, reproduction that cuts women out. Whether it's synthetic uteruses that are outside of the body. They can harvest ovum from women and sort of take over, and that way they don't have the mitigating factor of, somebody made a really good point where it's like one thing about that contributed to the AIDS crisis, and unfortunately it's not only on one hand, it was because the vagina has about 7 layers of, it's meant to receive a penis. Therefore, it's evolved to protect itself against sexually transmitted diseases. It's obviously not perfect. The anus is not really meant to receive a penis. So it doesn't have the same layers. It has only, 2 layers of mucosa to protect it from things like, transmittable sexual diseases. And so there's that. But it's also, again, women are the gatekeepers of reproduction, so we sort of slow things down. We have to be more sexually selective. Despite whatever liberal feminism tells you, women and men are not created equal. Being hypersexual does not serve women in the same way. It serves us to, monogamy is much more of a protective factor for women. Whereas men can have 100 women pregnant at once, getting pregnant by one man as a woman can change your life for the rest of your life. A man can have 100 women pregnant and have 100 babies and still doesn't need to miss a single day of work. He can still choose to not be involved in any of it. He might not even know. He could have 100 women pregnant that he doesn't even know about. No woman can conceive with a man and not even know it. Not, be able to just be free. She'll find out eventually, right? It impacts us in different ways. And so when you have, heterosexuality, where again, when you have two men, there isn't that sort of like gatekeeper. So from an evolutionary standpoint, where if it's men who want a wider variety of partners and who have to, sexually pursue things, it opens it up to just a lot more sort of, sexual activity. So if men can cut women out completely, we can cut women out of the raising and the rearing of children, female influence on children, on how we have children, who gets to have children. Again, because it's another thing that I think drives a lot of men crazy, is that ultimately, because women carry babies in their bodies, I understand that things like rape exist. I understand things that like sexual coercion exist. But ultimately, women still are the gatekeepers of men's fertility and of human fertility. It is not without a woman agreeing to carry a child for a man, allowing that to happen, that a man can have a genetic legacy unless he forces himself onto something. That's why rape developed. It's exactly why rape developed. Because it's men who are so anxious about being able to carry on their genetic. These are low-level, low-quality men. Because a healthy man, one of the greatest developers of a man, and this is why, the mothers of children should be grateful when a good woman wants to take on her son and should back off. Because the best developer of male character, other than having early good male influences early on, is trying to access a woman for marriage, for family, and for a legacy. Because she will hold a standard that he'll have to meet. Women already end up having to fulfill that standard because of the fact that they give birth. They say women become mothers from the point of conception. You already have to start making lifestyle changes immediately upon conception. You already have to start thinking about things because you have no exit route. Not, especially prior to abortion. It was as soon any sexual interaction could lead to conception that would change that woman's life forever. So she had to be extremely and exquisitely thoughtful about which men she exposed herself to sexually, and had to assume that any man that she exposed herself sexually, she might now have a forever connection to. Men don't have to think in that way. They don't have the same sort of impact. So that's why, women create these standards and these hurdles for men to get over to prove themselves. That's why, even something as small as the courtship tradition of making a man pay for the first date. He needs to show this woman that he is capable and willing to provide materially, so that when she is pregnant and she's in the throes of pregnancy and she's sick, she's vomiting, and she's unable to, keep up at her job, an 8-month-old pregnant woman is not going to be, going and applying for promotions and working a hardcore, like hardcore hours, or being able to keep up on the same level, or you know what I mean? Like looking to expand her career. A man can have a wife who was 8 months pregnant, and he can be competing, at his highest level. A woman won't be able to do that. And there is going to be a long time where then she has to be home and she's breastfeeding and she's nursing. And again, you have to understand that these are prior to artificial milks and things like that. Our bodies don't realize that we have the technology that we have. And you must remember that. Our bodies don't realize that we have artificial milk to feed our infants. Our bodies don't realize that we have things like abortion. Our bodies don't realize that we have things like birth control. So all of the evolutionary psychology and the ways that we've evolved to think and understand, sort of sexual strategy is, minus the technology that we have. So that's why we have certain courtship things. And that's why for loser men or low quality men who know that they can never meet the standard of a female partner to be able to continue his genetic legacy, has to, find other ways around it. Either he's just going to sit and he's going to just jerk off or whatever and let his legacy die out, or he's going to rape. That's why the men have developed rape, pushing themselves onto women to expand his sexual opportunities and his opportunity to conceive. And again, a lot of this stuff too is also subconscious. We say, a lot of men don't care about having kids. No. It's one of the greatest drivers of human behavior is reproduction. Okay, so then again, if men can't be successful, that's why, again, if you think of, even with transsexualism, if men are not able to access women, well, we can just create some women, right? We'll get some of these men, these Twinkie men who look well enough like women, and we'll get them to put on a wig. And now we've opened up a whole new dating pool. Men are imbued with a lot of anxiety about being able to reproduce that women don't have, because women already come with everything that they need to create their own genetic legacy. Men don't. So men have to find ways to access it. That's what gives birth to men like Jennifer Pritzker, who is spending inordinate amounts of money to create artificial reproduction and artificial reproductive technologies that will allow men like him to have full control over his ability to create a legacy, while cutting out which was formerly the biggest mitigating factor, which was women. You can cut women out entirely. You can take over the body and the bodily functions of women. This is part of transhumanism. Okay, this is a way to sort of extend themselves, to get full control over their lineage. This is, again, men before were the ones who would go out in the world because they would have to be the ones to come home and provide. Now they get to have it all. This is men's way of having it all. It's like the ultimate beta male. Let's see. All right. Dr. Christie. All right, so this is, again, the Pritzker family, the capture of Yale University, and the marketing of synthetic sex to children by Jennifer Bilek. This is written November 4th, 2022. This is on the 11th hour blog. Oh, no, this is on Jennifer Bilek's Substack, but I'm sure it's on the 11th hour blog, too. Okay, let's see. Dr. Christy Olszewski, promoting Yale University's gender clinic on Twitter recently, smiles into the camera and speaks with wide eyes and a lilt in her voice about the medical attack on children's healthy sex organs for expression. She's suffering a profound case of cult indoctrination, promoted by elites, driving an insane ideology of disassociation from sex reality into society. And again, and the reason why this whole idea of the trans child was engineered is because it's really hard to garner a lot of cultural support and sympathy for men like Jennifer Pritzker It's not as easy of a sell to say that, men like Jennifer Pritzker or Bruce Jenner are these super oppressed and sympathetic people, and that's what's pushing our need to, we're all going to side eye that and like, yeah, okay, what's the real story here, This is all for some sort of sexual gratification or getting more power or, again, playing, with the body parts of women. Men are so much more disconnected from their bodies than women are. Women have to live in their bodies because we have so much more biological consequence. And so that's why they engineered the idea of the trans child. Because if you can get to a child early and you can convince people that, wow, hey, you don't want to hurt these children. This whole idea of born this way. And they were able to capitalize on the sort of born this way mantra that came with the gay pride and gay rights, civil rights movement. That, hey, maybe some kids are just born like this. And that's what's going to allow people to green light and sign on. And then you can really sort of morally admonish anybody who criticizes it. It's like, oh, so you want these kids to suffer? You're saying that there's something wrong with them? It's crazy because it's like totally Darvo. It's like, oh, you hate them for who they are. It's like, no, you hate them for who they are. You're the ones who are looking at a healthy child, the healthy body of a healthy child, and saying, wow, something is really wrong with this. We need to cut this up. Something is so pathologically wrong with it. Something is so sick and diseased about this child, about the way that their body naturally grew, that we need to apply cancer treatments to it. Because make no mistake, Lupron is a cancer drug. Double mastectomies is a cancer treatment. These are cancer treatments. These are things that you do as a sort of a last-ditch effort in the most extreme sickness that we know, cancer. And these are healthy. We're giving cancer treatments to healthy children. How can you justify that? Nobody was going to sign on when it was a bunch of autogynephiles trying to claim that they were oppressed and that we had to support them and da-da-da-da. But once you can convince people, well, it's kids, well, then it's a different story. All right, let's see. Dr. Oleszewski is an associate professor of psychiatry at Yale University and the director and co-founder of their, quote, gender program, a nice euphemism for clinics that medically, here, let me make myself smaller here. Euphemism for clinics that medically attack the healthy sex of children and young adults. Yale's gender program, consumer based, she says, is 3 to 25 years old. 3 years old. Let that sink in. As the mother of 4 children, I can tell you that when my daughter was like 2 or 3, she used to say that she was a boy. And we would joke around with her about it. And be like, oh, we used to call her John, like as a joke. Because we're like, it's silly. We're like, no. But you're not. You're perfect the way you are. Whatever. Of course she grew out of it. She's still a little bit more of a tomboy than my other daughter, who's a super girly girl, but she oscillates back and forth. She still likes pretty dresses, but then just sort of has some tomboy interests and things. And I think that when she said, I am a boy, what she was really trying to say is, I see that there are certain things that are sort of marketed to boys, but I like some of those things. So I guess I must be a boy or I want to be a boy so that, I can justify why I want those things. And that's why it's important that we tell children, play with whatever, wear whatever. It doesn't mean that you're a boy or you're a girl, whatever. You know what I mean? You can like these things. It's all good. Her cavalier manner in discussing this barbarism is only surpassed by the absence of the word dysphoria. She speaks of gender-expansive individuals who identify as transgender, non-binary, or those on a gender journey. Let's see where... okay. For a decade, the gender lobby, aka elites invested in the techno-medical complex, have been promoting the idea of people and children with such intense discomfort in their skin that there is little choice but to mutilate their sex organs with drugs and subsequent surgeries, providing synthetic facsimiles of human genitalia, a now burgeoning market. Suddenly, there is no more talk about people with body dysphoria, but of expression, a journey, and people and children with expansive feelings about their gender. Again, you have to realize this all ties into big fertility. This all ties in to separating and divorcing fertility from being, from the burden or the privilege of the reproductive privilege. They say it's a reproductive burden. It's both. It's a reproductive burden and a reproductive privilege that is given to women. We carry that, right? We get to, it comes great responsibility. It does come with burden, and it also comes with freedom. We are free to choose. We get to choose which men will have a genetic legacy, and we get to hold that standard. And this is why also women need to stop carrying children from men who have not met a standard, and you must realize that you have something. I mean, if you're of reproductive age and you plan to have children, you want to have children, understand the power that you wield, and don't let anyone convince you that you don't have a remarkable amount of power. And you can hold men to a standard that they'll have to meet. Don't let them convince you that they're somehow the prize. They're not. I promise you, they're not. Hold that power, own that power, recognize that power. Don't let men convince you that they don't care about having kids and, these annoying women who have baby fever and they sit there. Well, I'll tell you, as a 35-year-old woman, men get baby fever hard. And I almost think it's worse than women. We always act like it's women who are the ones who are always pushing for a baby. No, it's men. I know I've dated men who sit there and would hound me about having kids. And that's what they talk about. Trust me, it's men who are very anxious about reproducing, whether they admit it or not. And I think that they don't want to admit it because they realize that it acknowledges the sort of weakened position that they are in. Women can talk about wanting kids because it's easy for her to have kids. Men know that they don't get to just choose. They have to convince somebody else to allow them the privilege. They have to, and with that comes that they have to sit there and develop themselves. This is why young men typically aren't chosen by women, because they haven't developed themselves enough. They haven't developed themselves economically, socially, politically, powerfully, whatever. They need to be able to bring something to the table, because the woman already brings something so profound to the table. They need to meet her somewhere. This is why, so when we can sterilize children from a young age, eventually these kids are going to come to a reproductive age, or what should have been a reproductive age, and they're going to get in relationships, and all of a sudden the 12-year-old who claimed that they didn't want kids and they didn't care about having kids, and all that mattered was right now these feelings of dysphoria and these feelings of wanting to be the opposite sex are going to fade into the background, and what's going to come to the surface are these intense, strong feelings of wanting to create a family. And when that happens, there's going to be that horrible sinking realization that, oh my God, I sterilized myself back when I didn't have the foresight or the prefrontal development to even be able to understand how my decisions of my past were going to consequently affect my future. Now I want to have children. What do? Those are going to be the first people to sign up for these experimental fertility testing and developing medically. Okay? Think about all of the women that they are convincing to remove their uteruses, healthy uteruses, voluntarily. prior to the transgender craze, the only women who were removing their uteruses were women who had uterine cancers or, endometriosis or fibroids or something very seriously anatomically and medically wrong with their uteruses. But how could we get young, healthy women to voluntarily remove their uteruses? Even women who don't want to have children, the fact of the matter is that our uteruses still are an important part of the network of health, of feminine health. They maintain, again, it's like our bodies are not just a collection of parts. They all function together. Once you take a uterus out, you're so much more prone to bladder prolapse and having pelvic floor issues and incontinence and having, shitting yourself. And so, some women might even need to have like a colon resectioning and a colostomy bag and things like this. And it's a sexual dysfunction. Because again, our bodies all work together in a system. So how can we convince young, healthy women to remove a part of our body that, a lot of men would like to get their hands on so that they could bypass female selection? Well, we can teach them that they're trans and that, you're a butch lesbian. No, you're not. You're actually a trans man and you can become a man. You were sexually violated in your female body. Just cut off your female body parts and you'll never have to go through sexual abuse again. You can escape the body that you were abused in. This is absolutely there is a reason for this. There's a reason why we are so silenced online, and I promise you it's because there is a ton of money and there are some very emotional, political, and social motives behind wanting this from some very powerful people. Do not get it twisted. I have outlined, Jennifer goes on to say, Bilek, not Pritzker, goes on to say, I've outlined in my previous research on the Pritzker family, one of the wealthiest families. I've outlined in my previous research. Let me make this smaller for a second. Let me move this over here. Okay, I've outlined in my previous research on the Pritzker family, one of the wealthiest families in America, their plight to engineer the normalization of synthetic sex identities through funding of our medical, legal, cultural, military, educational, and other institutions. Yale University has been privy to the windfall of the Pritzker cash and, subsequently, the creation of a growing program in manufacturing synthetic sex. Please understand, this was never a grassroots phenomenon. This whole transgender movement was never from the ground up. It has always been from the top down. This is from the so the idea that this is some sort of marginalized, very vulnerable class, it is such a falsehood. It's such a fabrication. It's such a lie. It's just to pull on the heartstrings of people, and it's to help build an army of people at the bottom who are willing to go to war on behalf of people at the very top. It is a very cunning strategy. It's taking people at the very top and positioning them as if though they're somehow the bottom of the oppression bowl. That they're the ones who are getting, shit on the most, and they're the most vulnerable, and they have the highest need for protection. And that's how you can convince people to go to war for them, to fight this battle for them. It was an excellent marketing strategy. Absolutely. Yeah, manufacturing consent. Yeah, Kara Vogue says it's manufacturing consent. That's absolutely what it is. It's manufacturing and just a systematic brainwashing of young women. It's the same. How did we get so many people to consent to Nazism during the Nazi era? People who were otherwise good people, decent people, they were all, just somehow evil? No, it's because these marketing campaigns can be very, very powerful. That's how you can convince otherwise good people to do horrible, horrible things and to co-sign horrible, horrible things. And it was Boston Children's. I have in one of my videos. It's A Nightmare in Boston. You should check that out if you haven't already. It shows just a horrific video that has now since been taken down, but that was originally posted to Boston Children's Hospital's YouTube page, talking about elective hysterectomies for children. This is in a pediatric gender clinic within Boston Children's Medical. And again, understand that Boston Children's was ground zero for pediatric trans, healthcare, medicalization. Boston Children's was the first children's gender clinic in the United States. And then it just exploded from there. If you haven't seen Gender Mapper's work, but she maps out these pediatric gender clinics. I also have a really interesting video coming up on gender clinics that I'm working on and looking forward to release. She goes on to say, let's see. Karen Pritzker, also should be known, J.B. Pritzker is the governor of Illinois. So literally, Jennifer Pritzker, aka James Pritzker, his cousin, J.B. Pritzker, is the governor of Illinois. So he has a whole political arm to operate within. And of course, J.B. Pritzker is sitting here signing off on all these bills, these pro-LGBTQ bills, pro-trans bills, also signing off on bills for big fertility, and we'll get into that. Of course, who is he being influenced by? They all are, it's a web. Again, there are 11 billionaires in this family. 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 billionaires with a B in the Pritzker family. This is not a joke. Karen Pritzker, part of the billionaire family, is worth $6.1 billion. Pritzker and her husband, Michael Vlock, I like how she kept her last name, have been funding Yale University ever since 2007, when they donated $3 million to Yale's pediatric clinic. So they started with a pediatric clinic. And if this does not give you more insight as to why higher education is in the leftist chokehold that it's in, it wasn't always like this. It wasn't always like this. Prior to George Bush and all that, universities were much more balanced, if not conservative. And that makes sense. 2007, it all makes sense. That's when all this Antifa really started to ramp up. And these, hyper leftist ideas really started to ramp up. Karen Pritzker is the sister to Jennifer Pritzker, formerly James, the retired Lieutenant Army Colonel. The latter appropriated womanhood in 2013 and began systematizing the normalization of synthetic sexes through our institutions with heaps of cash. Like her brother, Karen Pritzker is investigated in private medical tech, biotech, and medical device companies. Karen Pritzker is invested in private medical tech, biotech, and medical device companies. She has also invested significantly in Apple Corporation. Again, how better can Apple, for example, blocks any apps that don't fit with its terms of services. Another way to block speech, another way to ban authors. We don't publish in the same way that we used to. So this idea that, banning books is this horrific thing. Well, we're not publishing information the way that we disseminate information is different. So when you ban people on publishing sites such as Twitter, even if it's microblogging, is still a form of banning authors. Anybody who has been banned, as I said before, is a banned author. Your speech is being silenced. Even on YouTube, everyone's like, oh, how is your channel still survive? Because I know what I can say and cannot say. After a while, we learn how to self-censor. This is dangerous because speech, it influences the way that we think about the world. Speech is so powerful. Let's see. What are you guys talking about up here? Oops. Alice E says, following the money shows us where it's coming from and why it's something else. Locke says, the only grassroots part of the drag culture from club life. Oh, the only grassroots part of it is the drag culture from club life and the gender dysphoria of kids and young adults. I don't think that gender dysphoria is really a thing. I think that there's wanting to be the other sex for whatever reasons, but it's no. Again, and I quote this a lot, and I'll say it again. Joshua Moon, the founder of Kiwi Farms, talks about this as a rat king. A rat king, it's the idea when there's a bunch of rats that huddle together when it's really cold. They'll all huddle together, and they'll say that for days at a time when it's freezing. And then when it warms up and they go to move apart, their tails have become so intertwined that they actually get knotted together. And if somebody doesn't come and help them, they'll die that way. They found actually fossil records of rats being in a rat king. And that's so much of what this is, right? And so of course they've gotten they've sort of co-opted a lot of grassroots movements. It's more than just the drag culture and whatever, which was always a misogynistic, weird. Drag queens are sex clowns, as Exelanzic says, is the best way to put it. It's always been this weird, misogynistic. I remember as a kid, I used to always feel like embarrassed to admit, because I was like, oh, I don't want anyone to think that I'm homophobic. But like, I always thought it was so weird. And even gay men, these like, gay men who will like take on a really like sassy voice that's really fake. And it just seems like, it's almost like making fun of women, and trying to emulate certain like catty female stereotypes, like girl, oh bitch, huh? Oh no, the fuck you didn't. Oh, listen, sister, sweetie, okay? It's just like, and I used to be like, we don't even act like that. What the fuck are you doing? But yeah, they've taken on a whole lot of grassroots. So women fawning after drag queens drives me crazy. It's so cringe. It's so cringe. It's like, don't you understand? They're making fun of you. What don't you get? It's like, just be gay. You can be flamboyant. It's okay. You can be flamboyant and creative and like you can be campy. Like, okay, here's an example. Mr. Menno. Mr. Menno is campy, but he's not misogynistic, okay? So he'll take these, like, even like when you think of people like the Village People, they took these male archetypes, the construction worker, the biker, you know what I mean? The Indian guy with the headdress, which later I guess was replaced because they said it was racist. The war bonnet. But they took these male archetypes, these hot men, whatever, and they made it real campy. Mr. Menno does a lot of camp. You can be campy and fun without being a fucking a flaming misogynist and dehumanizing women. And again, because whenever they kind of draw in, female influences, is because, again, a lot of these men, gay men included, certain gay men, again, it's not all gay men, there's some gay men who are totally like not misogynist and don't treat women like they're objects, but see womanhood as just a sex receptacle for male sexuality, just a fuck receptacle, a cum dumpster, and so that's why it's sort of a joke that like the bottoms will call each other sis and things like that, and call each other girl and girlfriend. You can always tell who the bottom is because they start acting like a woman, because again, they just see women as these just like, fuck pockets for men. And it's sick. It's sick and it's weird. Drag queens are so boring. Aside from the misogyny, they're boring. Every comedy podcast these days has to have drag queens. I'm sick of them. Media affirmative section for boring men. Yeah, totally. I used to always just be, I don't know why, it used to always just be so weird to me and annoying. And I'm like, does this mean like I'm homophobic? Because the actual idea of men, loving and being with other men didn't bother me, but it was like the stupid mannerisms. I was just like, shut up. And then when I started to meet gay men who didn't act like that, I'm like, oh, thank fucking God. They're like, yeah. And that's why I was like, whoa, I probably had known a lot of gay men. They don't signal by acting like a total douchebag. I mean, oh, yes. It's like, what, you developed a lisp? That's interesting. You didn't always talk with a lisp, but now suddenly you do. And you're going like this a lot, and you're doing these like weird walks. It's like, what are you doing? But then when I met gay men who are like, oh, I'm gay. I'm like, wait, you're gay? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know. They're like, why would you know that? I don't think I've ever told you. I'm like, I don't know, because usually I can tell a gay man. And then I realized, I'm like, well, why is that? Because they, some of them act fucking flaming and annoying, and it's all this like, again, mockery of women. And there's plenty of gay men who are like, yeah, I don't do that, because it's dumb and it's irrelevant and it doesn't, you know what I mean? I don't get off on that sort of thing. There's this, All right. Let's see. Gay men are not immune to being misogynists. And it's like, we can call that shit out, and it's not homophobic. And there's plenty of gay men who don't do that sort of dumb shit. There's plenty of them. Sorry. I hope I'm not like sexually offending anybody with my yogurt. I'm not trying to yogurt rape any of you guys, but I didn't have lunch, so my fault. Please, my forgiveness. I beg of your forgiveness. All right, Dr. Oleszewski has been weaponized, like many in the medical community, to institutionalize gender ideology and elite technological religion devised to transform humanity by immense amounts of propaganda, selling medical tech intrusions on sex as a progressive human rights movement. Similar video advertisements to those starring Dr. Oleszewski making the rounds from Boston Children's Hospital's gender clinic. See, it's all connected. Boston Children's, as I just said, was the first children's gender clinic in America. It's all connected. So the Pritzker family has been funding it, and it was Boston Children's was ground zero for pediatric gender medicalization, and then it like exploded from there. Let's see. Yeah, oh God. Let's see if we can get any of this. Offering a myriad of options for gender-affirming hysterectomies to young people, and I have a copy of the advertisement for the hysterectomies, the cosmetic hysterectomies for gender dysphoric children. It's in my video for Boston Children's. Definitely check it out. It's real. It's disgusting. Boston Children's Hospital Gender Multi-Specialty Service opened the same year Jennifer Pritzker and her husband started funding the pediatric clinic at Yale. And again, you have to understand, these top universities like Yale and, Princeton and Harvard. I know Harvard's another one that really protects a lot of this stuff and promotes it. These are the Ivy Leagues. So they're majorly influential in the rest of the higher education university system. Majorly influential. When they start programs or when they take certain positions, it absolutely influences, the rest of these university and colleges. Let's see. Scooter says, I don't know if it's common knowledge outside of the gay community, but men who do drag, effeminate men, are the least desired in the gay dating scene. And I've heard that. Like the whole, like, and I've actually listened to a lot of really effeminate kind of like, flaming gay men who would always complain about not wanting other men like that, and even the more masculine men not wanting. They were saying, other super effeminate gay men don't want me and I don't want them, and but also the masculine men aren't into me, because the most coveted man is like the more masculine gay man who doesn't act all like annoying and girly. And it's a huge reason for the homosexual transsexualism. It makes sense. It's like, well, I want to keep acting like this. I still want to, and again, it comes down to sexual signaling. It's like they're acting like that because they're trying to show that, oh, I'm a bottom, and I'm a bottom, and I want to be the one, whatever. I want to be playing the stereotypically female role. And like you said, I've heard that from a lot of gay men saying that, like, they're the least desirable. Like when you go on Grindr, they're the ones who everyone's skipping past. And I've heard a lot of them say that, like, they were totally ignored as effeminate gay men, but once they transitioned to women, it opened up a whole other dating pool. Because again, it's like the type of men that they really wanted really weren't other gay men. They wanted straight seeming men. And there's such a select few gay men who actually like behave like regular men. And that's the one that everyone was going after. But if they could become women, then they could open up their dating pool to all these so-called straight men and bisexual men and whatever, or closeted gay men who just wanted to be able to, like, make it look like he's in a heterosexual relationship. And they're like, oh, and for the first time I was getting all of, way more attention. And of course, because it's, from a lot of tranny chasers and things like that. Men who hypersexualize and fetishize these trans-identifying males. I've heard the same thing. Let's see. Oh my God, this is crazy. I told you, Harvard. It's all connected. Boston Children's Gender Multi-Specialty Service opened the same year Karen Pritzker and her husband started funding the pediatric clinic at Yale. Many of the clinic's doctors are graduates of Harvard University. It's all connected. Where Penny Pritzker, Karen's cousin, has sat on the board since 2018 and became Harvard Corporation's senior fellow in 2022. The Pritzkers had deep ties to Harvard since 2002. It all makes sense because really it's been since like around 2002, I feel like, is when this slowly started getting put into motion. Right? It's been for the last 20 years, and then it really like started to take off. I'd say around like 2000 and, between like 2007, and it really hit the mainstream. I think like in the university system, we were all way more aware of the whole trans thing, started to become more aware of it, started talking about it more, when I was in university again, which was between 2006, 2010. And then it hit the mainstream for just your average person around like 2014, 2015. Even maybe earlier than that, but 2012, all that, and it follow the money. It's all connected. Again, if something has such a heavy hand that you're not allowed to even question. I mean, these are reasonable challenges to say, well, what about women in locker rooms? Or what about girls, women's sports, or women in prison, or little girls? And it's like, these are all reasonable challenges. Or, hey, should we, first look into why we're using male prostate cancer drugs in young children to block their puberty? Should we test that a little longer? And we get such a sort of universal backlash from people that you previously trusted. All of a sudden, all these institutions are, putting up the inclusive flag. Even my kid's pediatrician, and I got to figure out a way to confront this because I don't want to. All the doctors now wear an inclusive flag, and it's like I didn't want to make a scene in front of my kids, but no, I had to deal with that. The OBGYN that I had to see after I got cancer has all these questions about trans stuff. We know that comes from ACOG. This is very much a top-down phenomenon. You've got to think that if there's so much censorship, and it's such emotional censorship, And it's not because, oh, wow, everybody's just such a good person and this is such a human rights thing. Because there's a lot of things that you've been allowed to make fun of. People make fun of, rape jokes. People make fun of feminism, make fun of women, make fun of, criticize BLM, criticize a lot of things without the sort of pushback that you get from this. But criticize trans, oh, you can lose everything. You can lose everything. You gotta wonder why. The psychiatric community has been bought off by huge cash dumps from billionaires invested, and I'll say it again, the Pritzker family has 11 billionaires in their family, and they seem to all be on board. 11 dumps from billionaires invested in the techno, medical, and biotech industries, driving a religious cult through the media and all of our institutions. This is a profiteering enterprise, but also acts as a grooming process meant to unmoor humanity from the biosphere and acclimate us to more intimate connection with technology. So well said and absolutely true. So well said and absolutely true. Even the idea of creating avatars, like, those little like games that they have where you create a little avatar and you get to pick out their clothes and their face and you like go socialize with people from behind an avatar. Even the way that right now it seems, oh, I'm talking to all these people. No, I'm not. I'm sitting alone in a room talking at a machine. Right? This is how we're connecting. We're getting so used to becoming disembodied. You guys are not looking at me. You are looking at a bunch of pixels that are assembled in a way to, approximate my appearance. That gives sort of a reflection of what I look like. You understand? You're not hearing my voice. You're hearing a bunch of tones coming through your speaker. My voice has never touched your ears unless you've ever been in a room with me, and so few of you have. But we forget that, because anything that looks human-like, our brain processes as human. It's the same thing with something, someone like Blair White or whatever. They look woman enough, our brain will process it as a woman, even when it's not. And there's so much money to be had by, once we can convince people to disconnect from their bodies, you start to see women as a collection of body parts, and women who have the most powerful biology. We can start to take that power and create it for ourselves, and it's going to move towards, being able to have full control over fertility. And then what happens when we start growing babies in labs? When we start successfully creating these artificial wombs, what happens next? What happens to the babies that they don't come to pick up? Or who gets the right to make babies, and how many can you have? Didn't we say that corporations now have personhood status? So what happens when corporations decide that they want to start growing their own employee base? And again, this is all part of, and the whole idea of, oh, if your mom doesn't accept you, I'm your mom now, free mom hugs. They're doing everything they can to break apart the family unit. It's another reason too why, and I'm sorry, but breaking apart marriage, breaking apart extended family units. So from the rise of the industrial revolution, which is when we first started to see the nuclear family system emerge away from the extended family systems, whereas extended families who all sort of live together, then you have a mom and a dad in a house with kids. Well, they had to break that down even further. So they started to attack the family system. There was a point where women were incentivized to be single, incentivized to have children out of wedlock. And the best way to do it was also to create the sort of atheist movement. Because one of the biggest, protectors of the family unit, regardless of what you think of organized religion, is old religions are protecting the family unit, right? Who really enforce the sort of family structure. When you start to break that down, you're pushing atheism, you're silencing voices of, of religious students and things like that. And again, it's creating this idea, if you watch a lot of the movies that are now out for kids, those, your parents don't know you. It's always kids having to, show who they are to their parents who are, disapproving, and the stupid parents, but then they find some other trusted adult who's, I see you, I see the real you. and then like I have to show my parents, and the parents are these like dumb, one-dimensional characters who just don't get it. Mom and dad just don't get it. It's all engineering. It's all social engineering. Once we start to just break apart the family, women are incentivized to have children out of wedlock at a time when welfare programs were paying out more money to single women. Okay, you couldn't access certain welfare programs or certain nutritional supplementation programs unless you were single. If you were married, you didn't have as much access to things. Then we started to incentivize and actually pay out single motherhood. Okay, and this whole idea of the strong, independent female, women who can do everything, be a mom, have a career, do all this sort of stuff. And that's also, they knew that they were going to be able to start to push women towards supporting synthetic reproductive models if they could, get them to utilize all of their reproductive years and building careers and working for somebody's organization and prioritizing this very sort of like masculine identity of I'm gonna go out and be like a girl boss CEO and whatever, and then oops, I'm 40 now and I wanted to have children. Well, it's all good because we have artificial reproductive technology. So now women are going to push for it, right? There is so much money to be had if we can convince the population to not only break apart their own family units, because once you break apart the family unit, humans will always have a need for a family. Do not get it twisted. Okay? But we'll just have to supplement that. Who's going to step in? It's already happening in schools, the government. Okay, it's already happening that if you don't affirm your child's gender identity, what are they doing? They're calling in children and youth or child protective services. Kids are getting taken away from their parents and given to the government to raise. Okay, they're socially transitioning. If you haven't watched my live stream on how a school district very close to me, and it's happening across the country, they're socially transitioning children at school. They're calling in meetings with children. They are asking, do you have a gender identity? They're basically coaching kids on a gender identity, and they're asking, do you want mom and dad to be included? And I'm sure that they're posing it in a way that maybe it's best we don't tell mom and dad. And the kids are like, I don't want to tell mom and dad. Because the kids know that they're just experimenting with something, and they know that their parents really know them better than anybody. And can actually say, no, honey, this isn't you. And the schools are literally giving them a changing room to go change their clothes. And go look at my OK Groomer series. It shows all the videos of this. These schools are giving kids clothing to change into. They're changing their names and pronouns at school. But then whenever they talk to the parent, they revert back to the real pronouns and names so that the parent doesn't catch on. And they're basically grooming and coaching the child on how to keep this secret from their parent. The government is already stepping in as these children's parent. And of course they're stepping in for a lot of single moms. Jordan Peterson once said, I remember Lisa Michelle got all attacked me for saying this, but it's absolutely accurate. Jordan Peterson once said the smallest human unit, the smallest viable human unit is the nuclear family. And that's already very, very, that is bare bones. Once you break down even further than that, then we're going to have, you can't do it without a serious cost to society and to the well-being of this culture and society and the people within it. And we're already seeing it happen. Single motherhood destroys the lives of mothers and children, right? It's all part of it. It's all part about protect parent rights. That's all I can say. Protect parental rights, rebuild the family, rebuild small communities. We've got to protect each other from this. Let's see what you guys are saying. Welfare system was one of those, only giving money to women who had no man in the home. They would send people out to check the home for male presence. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then they started pushing the strong, independent woman. Do you know how much burnout that causes? I'm sorry, but as somebody who, was married and I left my husband because it was the right decision because of abuse, single motherhood is a tragedy. It's a tragedy for children. It's a tragedy for women. Sometimes but to enter motherhood and to tell women that, it's all good, just go it alone, it's dangerous, it's unethical, it's fucking insane. And it should not, we know that communities that are predominantly mother-led households do terrible. Now, when you have the occasional single mother in a community where it's predominantly intact families, those children do better because there's enough of a strong community, there's enough of an intact community to sort of support that family. But when I can show you what it looks like, communities where it's predominantly single mother household led households, and men are just kind of, I don't even know where they are. They are very dangerous, absolutely out of control. They're in Philadelphia. I can show you. It's destroying these people's lives. God, that's like a whole other fucking tangent. And I understand, even like with, that's why I have such mixed feelings with radical feminism, because I understand that like radical female separatism and things like that was so crucial for fighting for and preserving spaces for just women that we absolutely need. Things like rape shelters, things like, female only just communities and things like that. We absolutely need to fight and preserve that. But this idea that we should have, just start off with broken families and cutting ties. And again, I even think that the nuclear family is a broken family. Okay, because once we're trying to break away from, my sister's my neighbor. Our kids grew up together and take the bus together. I don't know what I would do without that. I wouldn't have been able to, I sure as shit would not have been able to leave an abusive marriage. I would have had to stick around probably for a whole lot longer because I wouldn't have had the sort of social safety net that I needed to thrive. It's why I'm thriving. It was a protective factor for me. My parents live 5 minutes down the road. My brother lives 10 minutes down the road. We plan to keep it like that. I already think that the nuclear family is already a broken family. The idea that there should be single parent homes with a house full of kids is dangerous. We see how dangerous it is. We see how bad those outcomes are. Yeah, I know I'm going to upset the rad femmes. They fucking hate it, but I'm sorry. But most of them don't have kids. Most of them don't understand the realities of things. Mostly, you know what I mean? A lot of them like live in this like la-la land where they're like, a bunch of women are going to get together and they can all raise their kids together. But then they complain about these like weak men. I'm sorry, young boys need like strong male leaders. Some of the best men that I know in my life grew up with a lot of good men in their life. A lot of the shittiest men that I've ever met come from single mother households. They were like the man of the house from the time they were a little kid. Some of the worst men I've ever met are men who grew up with a single mother and a bunch of sisters and had not one other man in the household. These are the men who they're lazy. They don't take responsibility for anything. They don't know how to be leaders. They expect women, because they've always had women leading and taking care of everything. That's all they've ever seen in their lives, is women taking care of everything. They never had a blueprint for when it's your time to step up and take leadership in the family and in the home. My father's one of the greatest men I've ever met in my life, and he had a father who could, was a Polish immigrant who worked in a labor yard, who was illiterate, but my God, he stuck by his family. You know what I mean? I've never met a really great man who ever came from a single mother household and who grew up surrounded by women. I'm sorry. Young boys, and as they grow, need good, strong male role models. Women can't do it. They can't, period. I really don't care, who that pisses off, but I also do believe that women need to have a much more robust system of other women in their lives. Women can't just be with a husband and that's it. Women absolutely need a robust system. That's why the midwifery model was so great for me. As a young mother, people were, oh, how were you able to be so successful with 4 young kids? And I went back to school and I was doing businesses and things like that because I was part of a midwifery community that prioritized community of mothers, where it was just mothers and kids. We can have those communities and still prioritize them without saying that we literally need to bisect our families and cut off, the other whole fucking portion of the family. My sons would not do well if it were not for my father in their lives. Their dad is still in their life. My brother's in their lives. And I make sure that they have those male role models. This is what they want. They want to destroy the fabric. We can be feminists. We can prioritize the needs of women, talk about the needs of women, I believe in female separatism. In the sense of, especially, female lesbian separatism, that has always been an important, they've gone the hardest for protecting female-only spaces. It is so critical, and I'm so grateful. But again, women who are mothers, have other unique needs. Children have unique needs, that need to be served by a broader community. Let's see. Arcus Foundation, the most prominent LGBT non-governmental organization in the U.S., founded by John Stryker in 2000 and funded by his Stock and Stryker Medical Corporation, to which he is the heir, has made vast transformations to the American Psychological Association, which promotes Dr. Olszewski's work through various donations and the creation of gender specialties. The Pritzker family has followed a similar trajectory of funding the psychiatric industry through significant philanthropic contributions to the U.S. university psychiatric departments. These psychiatric departments work in conjunction with the university gender clinics. In 2001, John and Lisa Pritzker donated $60 million to University of California, San Francisco, for a new state-of-the-art psychiatric building. And of course, they knew that UCSF, so University of California of San Francisco, was the perfect fertile grounds for doing all this kind of crap, because again, it was ground zero for the whole gay rights movement. And they were able to piggyback trans rights as somehow related to gay rights, which not only are they not related, but they're in direct contradiction to. The building will enable collaborative research and clinical care amongst members of UCSF's departments of pediatrics, neurology, radiology, neurosurgery, psychiatry, anesthesiology, and obstetrics, gynecology, all under one roof. Of course. This is how you're able to disseminate this through so many different channels so rapidly. It also features a child, teen, and family center that will provide a welcoming environment so young visitors will feel more comfortable receiving world-class mental health care. UCSF also has a transgender care center. The University of Michigan has a neuropsychology department bearing the Pritzker name and a gender clinic. The Gender and Sex Development Program at Lurie Children's Hospital opened in Chicago in 2013 with a $500,000 to $1 million gift pledge from Jennifer Pritzker, the husband of Gigi Pritzker. Another cousin sits on Lurie's board of directors. The Pritzker Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health at Lurie was launched with a $15 million gift from the Pritzker Foundation in 2019 and received another $6.45 million in 2022 to address, quote, concerns about mental health consequences for children and adolescents arising from the COVID pandemic. Let's see. When cash-strapped universities and other institutions are bestowed enormous amounts of money from oligarchic ideologues with missions of transforming reality, churn out... Let's see. No, I don't like... So, Silent Lily, I don't want gifts from the government, okay? I want the government to leave family systems alone. All right, I want us to restore, when we restore, like when I had, like I said, when I was back before my husband fucking fell apart, and I really believe my ex-husband did not start off the way that he was. All right, I'm just gonna give you a little personal history really quick. Okay, my ex-husband is like a math genius, and I actually think he's like on the spectrum. And when I say he's a math genius, I mean he's a math genius, right? And when we got together, he had gotten all these offers, like, I mean, big time offers. He took one on Wall Street. He was working for JP Morgan. Okay, he was working in finance. For 23 years old, he's making six figures. Okay, we had it going on. Okay, I wanted to become a nurse midwife. Whatever. We ended up moving back. You know, we had left because he was working in Manhattan, and then, you know, I got pregnant again. I was going to go to Columbia's midwifery program. I already had, you know, everything lined up. I'd taken my GREs. I had great letters of recommendation. I had already been working as a doula and all this sort of stuff. So we moved, you know, I got pregnant again. We decided we wanted to be back closer to family. He even got an even better job back in Pennsylvania, whatever. Okay. And I decided to work with lay midwives rather than going back to school. I started working with lay midwives, and I was more interested in home birth anyway. And being on call as a midwife requires that you are on call 24 hours a day. Okay, I had 2 young children at this time. Actually, I was pregnant when I was working in the Philippines at a high volume birth clinic in Taytay Rizal, where I was literally doing upwards of 2 to 4 births a day. Okay, and I had my ex-husband was there with me, supporting me. He took a leave of absence from work. You know, actually, no, when he left his job at JP Morgan, he created a gap. So we had a gap year. So we lived in the Philippines, and he was able to just to basically be the stay-at-home dad, and while I was working at the birth clinic. You know, so we had that support. I wouldn't have been able to do that without him, first of all. Okay, then we moved back. I had the support. So I moved back near my family, where I had my brother, my sister's now my neighbor, but this is when we had bought this other place. It was my brother was my neighbor. Okay, my parents lived down the road, and then my sister was literally like 3 minutes away. So I had 2 little kids. I was surrounded by family. I was also plugged in with a midwifery network, again, which prioritized women and children. So, you know, every Friday we would get together. All of us would get together, and we would do potlucks, and we would share and be together. Other midwives I know, the midwife that I worked in, and she's actually coming on my channel, and she's going to be a part of our protest, the ACOG protest on November 3rd. She has 8 children, and she runs a thriving midwifery business. How are we able to be on call 24 hours a day? I had to be able to get up and go at 3 a.m. if a birth called. The longest birth I ever went to was 72 hours long. Okay, I had to be able to, I've missed Christmas before. I've missed 4th of July. I missed my son's birthday. My son's birthday party that was at our home, and I had about 50 people coming over. Guess what? I was still able to pull it off, and I wasn't even there. How? Because I was surrounded by family. Okay, and my husband was in the home at the time, so I could leave in the middle of the night. Right? And he was, what happened with him was I don't want to get into his business. It's like mental health stuff. I also think it was really hard that he didn't have his family near him, right? I think that when we put so much pressure, I think when nuclear families really start to fall apart is when, like, we have to be everything to our partner. Okay, when our partner has to somehow take on the responsibility, like the roles that, you know, your mother and your father and your sister and your brother and your cousin should all play. Now all of a sudden you need all those things from one person, and vice versa. Okay, but I had so much support. I had an entire midwifery community where I could go drop my kids off. We had like child care co-ops, where I would tell people what my schedule was, and I said, I'm home between these hours. You can literally drive by my house and drop your kids off. And people, and other midwives would do it, and other birth workers would do it. Like, hey, I just got a phone call, you know, can I swing over and drop? I'm home. Go ahead. Okay, I'm not on call right now, or, you know, I'm home and whatever. You know, I would have, you know, women who could come and literally drop their kids at my house and then just come pick them up when they're done. And we had created these networks. Okay. And it's, you know, there were things that my husband could do for my sons that I couldn't. there's things that, you know, he could do in the home that, I mean, I don't want to sit here and play the role of a man. I'm sorry, I don't want to do it. Okay, when there's like, you know, when there was somebody, I thought somebody broke into our basement one night, and I was scared because we saw some things, like, you know, they left us alone. There were things, whatever. But for the next month, 2 months, I was terrified. Anytime I heard anything, what, should I have to go downstairs and check it out? Fuck no, you can go down. He would go down, and I would go and sit with the kids and make sure we were all good. Okay, there are certain things that, like, saying that women should have to do all of it. Like, fuck no. I mean, that's a whole other stream. It's a whole other stream, but I just think it's so dangerous when we're encouraging single motherhood, and then, like, you know, we're assuming, like, and honestly though, even with the support of my whole midwifery community, it's still not on the level of the things that my ex-husband could do for me. You know what I mean? Like, we could be there for each other in a lot of ways, but it's still not, I mean, the real, like, you know, like, heavy lifting of the family, we still had each other to depend on, you know, because we're the ones who really care about these children. You know, we created these children together. We're the ones who are going to be doing the problem solving and decision making for them, you know, and you know, really have their best interests at heart, and all this other shit. Anyway, sorry, I'm just let's see, how much time have I been on? Fuck. All right, I gotta get off the stream because I gotta stop it before it's 2 hours. We're gonna do part 2. I love you guys. We're going to do part 2. What time is it? 2:30. Fuck, I want to go for a run. All right, we're going to do part 2 right now. So I'm going to get off the stream, and I'm going to start another one. I'll see you guys in a little bit.